Hello, 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 world. This is Louise Hicks, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. And we're going to talk about the address from President Trump when he addressed Congress and the nation on Tuesday, March 4th, which happened to be my birthday, where I turned 74 years of age. I watched the entire speech and I saw Representative Al Green from Texas just speak out, had his cane and just pointing at the president, talking about Medicaid and Medicare, how president was not telling the truth about what was going on with Medicaid. So let's watch this news clip from Democracy Now! That will give more insight on exactly what was going on with Representative Al Green. And I would like to give my perspective about it. So let me go ahead and share it. And again, I'm Louise Hicks. Please share and leave your comments as well as give it your likes, thumbs up. And let's go ahead and see exactly what this was all about. And here we go.
Democracy depends on a free press. Please support our independent journalism at democracynow.org/give. And 60 years ago today, civil rights leader John Lewis led hundreds of voting rights activists over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, marching from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights. Alabama state troopers beat them mercilessly. It would be a turning point in the civil rights movement. 5 months later, President Lyndon B. Johnson would sign the Voting Rights Act into law. Today's civil rights groups are calling on lawmakers to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act at a time when voting rights are facing unprecedented federal threats. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. He did not obey. We begin today's show with Democratic Congressmember Al Green of Texas, who was censured by the House Thursday for disrupting President Donald Trump's joint address to Congress Tuesday night. The dramatic protest came near the start of Trump's record-long 100-minute speech when Congressmember Green rose and spoke out, shaking his walking cane as Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson called on him to sit down.
Likewise, small business optimism saw its single largest one-month gain ever recorded, a 41-point jump.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning. Members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the Sargent-At-Arms to restore order to the joint session. Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum. The chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
Congressmember Al Green's interruption of President Trump's address Tuesday night came amidst reports that House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had urged Democrats not to disrupt the address. 10 Democrats joined Republicans in favor of the resolution to censure Green, which said he had, quote, repeatedly violated the rules of decorum. Meanwhile, about 2 other dozen Democrats surrounded Green in the chamber and sang the civil rights anthem, "We Shall Overcome," as House Speaker Johnson read the censure resolution and banged his gavel before he ultimately had to call the session into recess.
The House to come to order. The House to come to order. Order. Shh. By its adoption of House Resolution 189, the House has resolved that Representative Al Green be censured, that Representative Al Green forthwith present himself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and that Representative Al Green be censured with public reading of this resolution by the Speaker. The House to come to order. The House to come to order.
That's House Speaker Mike Johnson trying to call the House to order as Congress members surrounded Al Green after his censure on Thursday, a day and a half after Trump's speech, singing "We Shall Overcome." Congressmember Al Green has repeatedly called to impeach Trump in the president's first and second terms. For nearly 2 decades, he's represented his district in Houston, Texas, which is home to many low-income and black residents. It's great to have you with us, Congressmember Al Green. Thank you for joining us. Why did you interrupt President Trump's speech?
Thank you for having me, Ms. Goodman. President Trump indicated that he had a mandate, and I wanted to let him know that he didn't have a mandate to end or to gut or to eviscerate or to cut Social Security as well as Medicaid. But my focus was on Medicaid. And I said to him, you don't have a mandate to cut Medicaid. Medicaid is needed by people who are not of means. We now live in a government that is of the plutocrats, by the plutocrats, for the plutocrats. They have Medicaid. They have doctors. We have to stand for people who are not as fortunate as others. I have good health care. I want my constituents to have the same health care I have. Many won't have it, but I'm going to protect what they do have.
Now, President Trump has said he is not going after Social Security, yet they are firing thousands of Social Security Administration workers. On the issue of Medicaid, you are not alone in representing so many people who are on Medicaid. In fact, many MAGA Republican Congress members are in exactly the same situation. Are you seeing behind the scenes that they're deeply concerned about these massive cuts to pay for massive tax cuts for the richest Americans?
I have not seen a scintilla of evidence indicating that there is any consternation with reference to the cuts. The state of Texas, Ms. Goodman, was offered $100 billion to aid people who were sick and without means, to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Texas turned down $100 billion to aid the poor because Texas would eventually have to pay 10%. The government would pay 90%. I assure you, I'm concerned, but many of my colleagues are not. We have to fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves.
Let me ask you, I think it was 10 Democratic Congress members joined with the Republicans in censuring you yesterday. I'm wondering, as someone who has survived segregation yourself, in a few years you'll be 80, you've survived Jim Crow, where decorum was seen as a way to dampen protest. What message do you have for all of those who censured you and said you broke the decorum of the legislature?
Well, there's so much to be said about what you've just called to my attention. Let me start with this. The President of the United States of America, at that joint session, pointed over to Democrats and called them lunatics. That was a breach of decorum. The president uses his incivility to take advantage of our civility. I refuse to allow him to do this. the president has to understand that he has to demonstrate some degree of civility and respect decorum himself, but he does not. Now, with reference to my colleagues, I told them I was going to vote present, so as not to pressure anyone to vote in any particular way, because I voted my conscience. I did what conscience called upon me to do, and my convictions demanded that I do when I spoke to the president. I would do it again. I regret that I've been censured. There is talk now of removing me from my committee with the Honorable Maxine Waters, the Financial Services Committee. My guess is this is not over, but I will stand on what I have done. I'm not ashamed of what I have done. And when you mentioned John Lewis at the genesis of this interview, it caused tears to well in my eyes. I knew him. I know his story. He told me that he thought he was going to die on that bridge. And he told me about peaceful protest. And the one thing that stands out in my mind is when you do it, be prepared to suffer the consequences. Dr. King went to the Birmingham jail because he was prepared to suffer the consequences. I'm prepared to suffer the consequences. I don't say I agree, but I will suffer whatever the consequences are because I represent people who cannot represent themselves.
So just to reiterate what you're talking about, today is the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, yes. March 7th, 1965, when John Lewis, your colleague in Congress, before that civil rights leader, led hundreds of voting rights activists from Selma trying to go to Montgomery. They were walking over the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they were beaten down by Alabama state troopers, John Lewis having his skull fractured. It would be a turning point in the civil rights movement. 5 months later, President Johnson would sign the Voting Rights Act into law. Congressmember Green, do you think this is a Bloody Sunday moment right now? The low point before a high point?
I hope that we have reached the depths of this, but I'm not sure, given the behavior of this president. This president doesn't seem to understand that there are people who don't live in the same level of life that he lives in. He lives in the suites. There are some people who live in the streets, and we have to concern ourselves with them as well. And with reference to that march, may I just share this piece of information? Frank M. Johnson was a federal judge who issued the order to part the way, to cause those officers to leave the Edmund Pettus Bridge and to allow them to march on. I mention him because his place in history has not been acknowledged. He was a white Southerner who was a George Wallace contemporary, but he had the guts. He had the guts and the courage to take a stand that caused him to have security 24 hours a day. They bombed his mom's home. We have to have that kind of courage now. We've got to take a stand against what this president is doing with his incivility. We're going to have to demonstrate. We're going to have to protest. I don't want us to have to harken back to the 60s, but we are being treated as though we are in the 60s. We have to do more than simply say that we want legislation. We've got to demonstrate, and we've got to protest and be prepared to suffer the consequences.
Congressmember Green.
And I want to stop for just a second. Let me go and let me stop. Share again and stop. Because
I am, and I am currently nearing the end of the first draft. I believe that he has done things that would merit impeachment.
Let me stop for a second because I want to discuss some of the things that Representative Green has been talking about. And he's a representative from the state of Texas. And I live in the state of Texas sometimes, as well as California. And I've done videos on California because of everything that's going on in California as well, which is a lot of ridiculous, all kinds of just injustices in California, how things are being carried out, the fires that have gone on, and how the reparation situation, all these studies and so forth. And what he is talking about, I can say, being that he's probably a few years older than me, I remember a lot of these things that happened, the Bloody Sunday. And I was young at the time, but I remember those things. I was a teenager, and I remember all the water hosing, the Alabama situation with Governor George Wallace at the time. I remember all of that, the colored water fountains. My mother refused for us to go and drink out of them because we were not going to be treated like we had a plague or something. So we didn't drink out of those fountains. So when Representative Green, Al Green, talks about what happened and what he did while President Trump was speaking, what I guess he got what was expected. He was in violation, and it was inappropriate what he did. I mean, not that I'm so concerned about him disrupting the speech, because it wasn't the first time that this has happened. I recall when President Obama was speaking, and this senator, I believe he was a senator, I can't recall his name, he just screamed out, "You lie," boldly, "You lie." Nothing was done. And also Marjorie Taylor Greene, how she and Boebert, how they act up in Congress while presidents were speaking, and nothing was done. And I believe Johnson, at one of these occasions, I think he was the speaker, and he didn't do anything then, but it was Republicans acting up. Those two ladies that act up an awful lot. I mean, they act real ugly. And nothing was done. But look at the Democrats. You have to look at what they're doing. They do nothing. Why didn't they censure this uh, senator? I believe it was a senator that called President Obama a liar. You lie. They did nothing. So the Democrats, you stood by, you did nothing, you allowed this to happen. You should have taken care of your business and did the same thing when all of this was going on with Taylor Greene, with the senator that hollered out, "You lied" to Obama. The Democrats did nothing. And I remember all of this. But yet, this Mike Johnson did what he was supposed to do. He took care of the business because it was interruption of the speech when President Trump was speaking. And it's not that I would take the sides of the Democrats or the Republicans, because I got out of the Democratic Party when I was in my 30s because I didn't see anything of substance that they were doing to enhance economically the lives of Black people who put them in office. And all they would do was talk, no action, just talk about what they would do to get Black people to give them the vote. And Black people have voted Democratic for what, 50, 60 years, ever since I can remember, since I started voting when I was 18. And I did not vote in this past election. And anybody that wants to criticize me for not voting, that's your prerogative. And I had a reason for not voting, because I voted and voted and voted. And here we are, 2025, we're still out here fighting, fighting, fighting. So if we're voting and there's no policy put forth specifically for Black people who have put these Democrats in office, and Democrats have had all three areas of government a number of times. And what have they done? They've had the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. And what have they done with it in terms of specifically doing something for Black people? Nothing. And they have done specifically for LGBTQ. They've done specifically for other groups, being the law that was passed or the executive order for the Asians, when that situation happened. I believe it was in Georgia when those Asians were murdered. They've given reparations specifically to Holocaust victims when that didn't even happen on American soil. So what are we voting for? And that's why I chose not to vote for either Kamala, because she already has spoken what she was not going to do anything specifically for Black people. And Black people built, our ancestors built this country against all the atrocities, the rapes, the hangings. I mean, it's been, and it's still going on. All of this stuff is still going on. So what are we voting for? I will vote when there are some policies that are put forth to enhance economically the debt that is owed to Black people, that being reparations. What are we voting for as Black people when we're still out here fighting? So the handwriting is on the wall. And all of these talks without any action, it's just a distraction to keep Black people up in arms, feeling powerless, instead of doing something, taking some action. Do what other groups are doing. How do they get their policies taken care of? The transgenders, the illegals, even illegals get more from this country than Black people, our people whose ancestors didn't come over here voluntarily like these other people. They're coming voluntarily. Our ancestors didn't come here voluntarily. They did work that lazy white people did not want to do and didn't do. That's why they brought Africans over here to work. And we have to be bold and speak up and speak out about what is going on here. And we're not doing it. And a lot of us are professing to be Christians, but we are not following that biblical principle that says, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. So where are we exercising this power that we have and allowing these politicians to just talk, talk, talk? And when I hear Representative Al Green talk about Medicaid, and I'm not opposed to some of the things that President Trump is doing. I'm not opposed to some of it, like illegal immigrants coming over. Look at what they've done in Chicago, giving them luxury visa cards, hotels, luxury hotels, cars, homes. In California, they've given, and I pay taxes in three states, Louisiana, California, and Texas, because I have ownership in all three states. And I'm sick and tired of my tax dollar being given. California, Governor Newsom, and he made some little lame excuse that there was no money. However, when there was money, they were giving $150,000 interest-free to illegals to buy homes in California. And I know my kids can't afford to buy a home in California. They're not giving citizens like my children $150,000. And his lame excuse, and I voted for him. But never again. Never again. I'm not voting for any Democrats anymore unless they have an agenda and some policies that will economically empower Black people and talk about studies. That's all they talk about, doing these studies. No study. And we have to start speaking up and speaking out. What are we fearful of? You're only telling the truth, and we need to teach our children the truth. Everybody else, all cultures teach their children their history. And we act like we are afraid to teach our children our history. That's why I taught my children. I bought them books and read. I have Dr. Claude Anderson's books, all of them. Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, Dirty Little Secrets, the Black History book. And I haven't read all of them, but I've read back in the 90s, Black Labor, White Wealth. I mean, white people are benefiting from the labor that was put in by our ancestors, and they had to go through all of these atrocities. And here we are, 2025, 21st century, and Black people are still fighting for justice. For justice. And we're talking about, well, Representative Al Green is talking about impeaching the president. What is that going to accomplish and achieve? And I don't believe he's going to be impeached. They've done it multiple times, and look where he is now. He's president. So what good is that going to do? Why are we investing energy into impeaching the president? Why don't we look further into the Medicaid? Now, in California, where I came from, we have what we call Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid for Californians, which is called Medi-Cal. And I'm glad that something is being done and investigated, because I have a personal interest in the corruption of the medical system. It is totally corrupt. That's why a lot of doctors are quitting, nurses are quitting, because they're fed up. They can't even medically take care of their patients because of the corruption, because of all these different layers of bureaucratic layers of the Medi-Cal system. And I'm talking about what I know in California. And that cost my son his leg to be amputated because of the various layers of Medi-Cal that took over, these different third-party administrators that took over Medi-Cal. And they put people in it fraudulently, like they did my son, who had cancer at 14. And after that, he had mental issues as a result of having cancer at the age of 14. He didn't lose his leg until 2024 in December, because of all of these layers of bureaucratic nonsense. He had to go through LA Care, Blue Shield Promise, something else called Central City, and Alliance. 4 bureaucratic layers of nonsense, a waste of taxpayers' money in California. And they have something called an oversight, the managed care, that's run by the state of California. And I'm telling you what I know, because I tried to get help for my son and I couldn't get any help. All these layers, all they do is give you the runaround. And then they're supposed to have the oversight, the state oversight, managed care. What do? Pass the buck when I called them to get help. They passed the buck right back to LA Care, Blue Cross Promise. And my son ended up losing his leg because I could not get the help that was needed. So I'm glad he is checking into all of this federal money that's going to waste with some of these layers, bureaucratic layers that aren't doing their jobs. And it shouldn't be about cutting the funds to Medicaid. From my perspective, it should be about accountability, responsibility, and making these people hire competent people to do their jobs, because there are a lot of incompetent people in some of these government jobs. And I'm telling you from my own experience, because I worked in government in LA County, 32 years. I worked in private industry in Texas, about 5 years. And we're giving money to these corporations as well, our tax dollars, and they have waste with them too. So we need to look at both, not just look at the public sector. We need to look at the tax dollars that's being wasted. Why do you think they had to bail out the auto industry and the banks? And we pay all of this money is going to these CEOs. And why do you think Lugingi, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but the gentleman that shot and killed the CEO, I think his name was Brian Thompson from United Healthcare. We're in a crisis here. And these people, all they're doing, they're lining their pockets. And I'm not happy and thrilled about the way President Trump is going about it, because it's appearing to be that Elon Musk is the president, like he's running America. And he was born over in South Africa, and I guess he was naturalized as a citizen. However, we need to take a look and start using our critical thinking skills about what these politicians are doing, and start, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, vote them out. And we got to stop looking at the lesser of two evils. Why would we want any evil? That's why I didn't vote, because I wasn't looking to vote for any evil. Because Kamala Harris had already said, well, she was not going to do anything specifically for Black people, but she made sure she got a bill, executive order signed for her Asian people. She made sure of that. And we have to start exercising our power, speaking up and speaking out. Stop all this fear and not taking any action on our part. And I'm a baby boomer, but I'm not your average baby boomer, because a lot of baby boomers have just become complacent. And a lot of us dropped the ball on our children, because a lot of baby boomers got into drugs and they were using excuses. Oh, well, I needed to do something. I couldn't get a job. I didn't have that problem. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. However, I put myself through college, getting a bachelor's degree in social work. I didn't use excuses that I can't do this, I can't do that. I was raised to take that word can't out of my vocabulary. And for a lot of us who got strung out on drugs, just because white people, we know who put the drugs in there, allegedly CIA, and there was a documentary about it. And the FBI was allegedly involved in all these drugs being dropped in the Black community, but you didn't have to take them. I didn't take them. You didn't have to take the bait. And now here we are, 2025, and Al Green, who is in his late 70s, from what I looked up on him, and he's out here talking about impeaching. Why not create some policies when the Democrats were in power? Democrats have been in power multiple years. And what have they done? Nothing but walk up in the Black churches and make promises, which was amounted to nothing but lies. And where are we now? We're worse off than our foreparents were, because they started towns, Rosewood in Florida, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and multiple others that white people destroyed out of jealousy. Do your homework, do some due diligence, look up all the towns. Some of them are underwater now. Thriving Black towns that Black people were, this was doing Jim Crow. Black people were thriving in doing our own thing in a segregated world. And now here we are, we have dropped the ball, a lot of us as baby boomers, on these kids. And here a lot of these politicians who need to go home because they're not doing anything. The Congressional Black Caucus, what are you doing? Nothing. What bills have been put forth? Why aren't you pressing the president of his thoughts on reparations? I don't believe anybody has ever asked President Trump, what are your thoughts on reparations? I can pretty much imagine what his thoughts probably are, but if you ask not, you get nothing. If you're asking for nothing, you're not going to get anything. And if you're not taking any action and you're not voting these people out, you keep voting these Democrats in over and over and over. And I press on the Democrats, because that's who we've been voting for over and over and over. And the Republicans have cared less about your votes. I coined them one snake with two heads, a red head and a blue head, Democrats and Republicans. And we have to really stop and think about what we're doing. And we have all this money running through our hands $2 trillion annually. And what are we doing with our money? We have to start using that melanated critical thinking. So let's get back to Al Green and see what else he has to say, because I don't see what impeaching the president is going to do. And I didn't hear him say anything about what he's going to do for Black people specifically. What policies are you all, as Democrats? Democrats are acting like a bunch of cowards. And that's been going on. You do a lot of talking, but what are you doing? The Republicans are taking care of business right now. Trump is pretty much doing everything he told you he said he was going to do. It shouldn't come as a surprise what he's doing, because he's doing what he said he was going to do. So let's get back to the video and see what else Al Green is talking about.
For edification purposes, if we wanted to impeach a president for speaking ill of Congress, as the president did, we can do it. How do I know? Because in 1868, Andrew Johnson was impeached for speaking ill of the House of Representatives. Impeachment is not all that the scholars would have us believe it is. It is what Gerald Ford said when he was in the House. Whatever a given Congress concludes that it is on a given time, at a given time, when you can get 218 members, assuming that you have a full complement of members voting, to vote for it, then that's impeachment. It really is that simple. It's been done to presidents before, and of course we know about Clinton and we know about others, but the point that we have to make is impeachment is a remedy for a runaway president who believes that there are no guardrails, who believes that the Supreme Court has placed him above the law, and who is now very close to a point where he will not honor court orders. When he does that, Ms. Goodman, he at that point will become a dictator. We are this close. When he goes over that line, that second, that scintilla of a second, he will become a dictator, and we will be under a dictatorship. I refuse to wait until that happens before I act. So I will act in defense of the Constitution and for the people of this country.
Congressmember Green, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to talk about your friend, the former Houston mayor and recent Congress member, Sylvester Turner, who died Wednesday at the age of 70 after he had attended President Trump's speech the night before. I want to play Sylvester Turner's last public message addressing the potential cuts to Medicaid.
This is Angela Hernandez, my guest tonight for the State of the Union. Angela is here to advocate on the importance of Medicaid.
I'm Angela. I'm from Houston, District 18. My daughter is Daisy Garcia. She's 2 years old. She has a rare genetic disorder, chromosome 8p, inversion duplication deletion. Causes a lot of developmental and medical challenges. So losing Medicaid would be devastating to us.
So please let people know. Don't mess with Medicaid.
That is Sylvester Turner, newly minted Congress member, longtime Houston mayor's last message before he died on Wednesday. Your final thoughts, Congressman Green.
25 years he served in the State House, 8 years as mayor of the city of Houston. He was a public servant par excellence. He cared about people, and he made a difference in the lives of people. I will miss him. When Bishop Dixon called me and told me that he had transpired, I fell to my knees and I cried, literally, not an exaggeration, because he had just been with me on the floor of the House, and I couldn't believe that this could happen in this way. So I miss him, but I want his family and his friends to know that he served us well. They have my deepest sympathies, and my prayers are going to be that others of us will take up the mantle, the torch that he has carried all of his life. He was a great public servant.
Congressmember Al Green, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Texas Democrat who was censured by the House yesterday for disrupting President Trump's first presidential address as the second-time president. In 2017, Congressmember Green became the first Congressmember to call for President Trump's impeachment from the floor of the House of Representatives. Coming up next, as House Republicans push for $2 trillion in federal spending cuts, more than $4 trillion in tax cuts for the richest Americans. We'll speak to Bishop William Barber. Back in 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to stop. That's an interesting subject that they're talking about, some cuts for the richest Americans, because they have gotten a lot of perks, these rich folks, on the backs of the little folks. Because I know, me for one, Texas always say, well, we don't have any state income taxes. However, Texas has very high property taxes. And I'm speaking from personal experience. Most of my speeches come from my own personal experiences because I've been around for 74 years as of Tuesday, the day that Representative Green was kicked out of the speech that was going on, the address. And Texas has some of the highest taxes. The property taxes are ridiculous. And they cut them a little bit and then they raise them back up, said they had some surplus and raised them back up. And for them not having any state income taxes, they make it up in property taxes. So we're not getting any advantages here in Texas just because they don't have any state income taxes, because believe me, they make it up in property taxes. The property taxes are horrendous. And we need to start holding these politicians accountable, vote them out. And I'm for voting when I see some policies, because I used to vote once I turned 18, I voted in everything. I would review what I'm voting for and I would vote. But I didn't vote in the last election, and whoever doesn't like it and feels, I've heard some people say, oh, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. Oh, I have a voice because I pay taxes through the nose in 3 states. So I have a voice. And some of you who are saying that, you probably only pay sales taxes and maybe some others because maybe you don't own anything to pay taxes on, pretty much, except for all the routine taxes that you pay on your phones and your utilities and that type. But when you own property, particularly in states like California and Texas, you're going to pay through the nose for those property taxes, I'm telling you. And it's ridiculous when the rich people get, I mean, they hardly pay any taxes. Income taxes, rich people don't pay any income taxes. President Trump, I think his was disclosed what he paid, and it was practically nothing. They got all kind of loopholes, and they cater to the wealthy because we don't hold anybody accountable. Particularly us as Black people, we don't hold these Democrats accountable. We just keep voting for them, except they got fooled this time because Black people, particularly younger Black people said later, I'm going to stay at home or I'm voting Republican. Many Black people did vote Republican. And like I said, some of the things that President Trump is doing, I agree with it. Because there is a lot of waste. And I know everybody is saying he's going to do this for the rich, and he probably will, because we live in a capitalistic society. That's why I impress upon our people to become entrepreneurs. Do your due diligence. Teach your children our history so that they won't sit back and wait on government crumbs, because that's not going to empower us. We have enough money running through our hands that we can empower ourselves. And that's not to say we don't deserve the reparation. That's a debt that's owed, and we need to keep fighting for it. I know I will. And that's what Jasmine Crockett, Al Green, and all these black caucuses, stop all this study. We got to study this for reparation. What are you studying? We know slavery existed. We know who built this country. You didn't do any studies for all these other things that I've mentioned prior. So what are you waiting for, Democrats? That's why you lost the election, because you aren't doing anything but talking. And younger, this younger intelligent generation, they are sick of the talk. They are sick and tired of hearing speech after speech after speech that's filled with nothing, no action. And like I said, I'm about vision, hope, faith, knowledge, and action, and aim to purpose, which is about aspiration, inspiration, motivation, edification, and determination. We have to be determined as a people to be economically empowered and speak about the debt that is owed, which is reparations. It's not like you're giving Black people nothing, because you're not. The people that have benefited from our ancestors' hard work through all of the atrocities. And this stuff is still going on. Here we are in the 21st century, 2025, and Black people are still fighting for justice. That tells you right there, you've been voting for Democrats all these years, and what have they done for Black people? Nothing. That's why I got out of the party when I was in my 30s, because I used my critical thinking skills to see what they were not doing, specifically for Black people, the ancestors, our ancestors, and we are the heirs. Whenever you are an heir, you're supposed to receive as an heir. So this is a debt that's owed, and we don't need all these studies. Study this, study for what? You've done enough studying. So let's do the right thing and demand that the debt is paid. Because whenever you owe a debt, you're supposed to pay it. That's the right thing to do and the righteous thing, because you shouldn't have never had slaves to come over here forcefully in the first place. That was unrighteous. That should have never happened. Chattel slavery should have never happened. It's an atrocity that will forever be a blemish on American history, in American history. And no matter what you try and do to take it out of the history, Black people will never allow that. No other ethnic group are you trying to get their history taken away, but you want our history, which is American history. Chattel slavery is American history, and we need to teach our children, and we need to know our history, and we need to become entrepreneurs so that we can, like Dr. King said, learn, build, take action, and spend our money wisely. Patronize Black businesses. That's how we grow. And a lot of this stuff that happened in Congress, it was nothing but distractions to have Black people all angered and get you out in the streets again, when we don't need that. What we need to do is unify and pull together and build, learn together, build together. We need our own educational institutions. That's what we should be doing, because if you get out in the streets, all they're going to do is what they did in the 60s. And when they were sitting there talking about we shall overcome, we need to take some action. That was in the past. And that's why a lot of these older people like myself, you need to retire and give these jobs to the intelligent young Black people who are out here grassroots talking about policies. We need to have policies implemented. And when the Democrats had all three branches of government, the executive, judicial, legislative, you had an opportunity to implement policies to empower economically Black people, and you didn't do it. That's why I say we have one snake with two heads, and all you do is talk out of both sides of your mouth and do nothing, like a bunch of cowards, like you did not censure the gentleman that told President Obama, "You lie." Marjorie Taylor Greene with all of her nonsense, and that Boebert woman, whatever her name is. It's ridiculous how you Democrats sit back and you act like you're afraid to say anything or do anything. Why didn't you do what this House Speaker did? And I believe the House Speaker didn't censor at one point in time. I think he was the Speaker when those ladies were out there acting a fool. And he didn't censor his own Republicans. So Democrats, I'm telling you, you're going to keep losing until you come to your senses and recognizes who puts you in office. Because Black people have had it. Enough is enough. And I'm a baby boomer, and I know is enough for me. And I pay too much in taxes where I have a voice, and I'm going to speak it. And I have no problem speaking up and speaking out, because God has not given me the spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And this has no bearing on me hating anybody. I don't hate anybody. However, I love my people, and I'm always going to speak up for my people, because that's the righteous thing to do. And with that said, I will close, and I hope and pray that we as Black people don't start in the streets to get what happened in the 60s. You might get water hosed, you might get shot. So we got to start using that power, that sound mind, and work together. Utilize our money. Invest. Teach your children how to become entrepreneurs, so you can have that legacy and that generational wealth. I've done it, and I did it as a single person most of my life. Not a lot of my life. I was a single parent, but I knew what I needed to do, and I had no fear of speaking up against all the discriminatory practices that was leveraged against me in Texas, California, Louisiana. That's what prompted me to leave right out of high school in Louisiana, because the racism is all over this country. It's not just in the South. So we just have to do our due diligence. And if you do your due diligence, you have the power to speak up and speak out, because you will be able to articulate all the injustices that this country has leveraged against us as Black people. We're the most hated people in the world, not just here in America. And there's a reason for it. We're brilliant people. Some of us act a fool, but majority of us, we're brilliant people. We have a lot of intelligence. Sometimes we just act like we are afraid to exercise our power. And we got to get away from that. And we got to hold these politicians accountable. And I talk about the Democrats because the Republicans can care less about you, and the Democrats can care less about you too. However, they put up a front, and they keep you voting for them when they do nothing for you. So with that said, I'm Louise Hicks. Please share, subscribe, leave your comments, give it a thumbs up, and just remember, your power lies within you. Let it loose, because your destiny is your command. Remember that. And I'd like to thank all of my new subscribers, my new supporters. I appreciate you subscribing to my channel. Please, again, share, 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 because knowledge is power when you use the action to exercise that knowledge with vision, hope, faith, knowledge, and action. Get aimed to your purpose. We all have a purpose here on earth. And use it positively to elevate, because that's why I started this podcast, because I'm about elevation of our people to a higher level of consciousness. That's important for us to come together as a community, collectively. There are some individuals that are doing well, but we have to come together collectively and learn, build. That's what Dr. King was all about, learning and building. That's why he was killed, because he was on economic empowerment. He had gotten off a lot of that other stuff about sitting next to some little white kid that was no smart, or many of them weren't as smart as we are. I worked with some that got promoted over me, and they expected me to train them. And I said, hell to the no. As Bishop Bullwinkle said, hell to the no, no. And I didn't do it. And I got promoted because I spoke up and spoke out. And I had the documentation to prove what I was talking about. That's the other issue. You got to know how to document. You got to know how to do your due diligence. Do your research, do your homework. I've never been fired from a job. And once upon a time, one job, I said, well, let them fire me. Good, because I got all the documentation that I need. And I never was fired. And believe me, I filed on them. I had no problem in filing because I knew what I was doing. You have to learn how to outsmart these so-called white supremacists. That's what they call themselves, but I don't see them as being supreme to me or any other intelligent Black person. So with that said, I will close. And again, thank you to all of my supporters, my subscribers. Share, share, share. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, leave your comments, and I will see you in the next video. And remember, your power lies within you. Let it loose, because your destiny is your command. See you in the next video.